Hi, everyone. My name is Danny Garcia. I am a board certified music therapist with American Music Therapy Association and the Certification Board of Music Therapy.
And before we get too far into it, first, why don't you talk a little bit about your musical history? What's your history as a musician? How long have you been studying music?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, even in a non scholastic sense, I've played music, man, I guess since I was about 10 or 12 years old. Started with guitar. Actually, I started with violin and I ended up not liking it. Uh, I know you're a string teacher.
Hey, 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 hey! I'm cutting this out. I'm cutting this out.
So I didn't like violin. I ended up moving to piano eventually, and I really enjoyed learning piano. And then I settled on guitar because I mean guitar is just amazing. I fell in love with guitar, and then from there it went into being a hobby, into just being like a way for me to express myself. And then I decided, hey, well, why not take it all the way? I started learning in high school with Mr. Stefan Shuga at Franklin High School on the west side of El Paso, who's not there anymore, unfortunately. Amazing guitar teacher. Um, I learned all through high school, and then after that, I went to El Paso Community College, where I got my associates in music there from Armin Harrison, who was my private teacher for classical guitar. And then I went to Seattle Pacific University for my bachelor's in music therapy, in music therapy, where I learned more on classical, and then I actually did 3 years of jazz guitar.
And the university you went to in Seattle, if I remember correctly, music therapy is not really offered too many places, right? As far as like a degree choice.
Right, yeah. So it has to be an accredited degree plan from the American Music Therapy Association to be an actual music therapy program. So there were none of those near me when I was going for my bachelor's. I think the closest would have been possibly Texas A&M. I think is Lubbock. And I personally just didn't want to be in Lubbock, but but also I had family in Seattle, and it's actually one of the top rated music therapy programs in the country. And like you were saying, yeah, not many colleges actually offer a legitimate music therapy degree. And
Oh,
Seattle Pacific University offered three pathways to take it. You could have music therapy with an emphasis in psychology, you could have music therapy with an emphasis in special education, and you could have music therapy in as emphasis in, I think it was physical science.
hmm.
And I got mine in emphasis in psychology.
Oh, okay, awesome. This is a great time for our first question. This is from Itzel. She's from eighth period. What is music therapy, and where did it first come from?
That's a very interesting question. So I have to give you the literal definition approved by the Music Therapy Association, and then I'll give you my own. So, firstly, okay, so let's say the AMTA, the American Music Therapy Association, it defines music therapy as a clinical and evidence based use of musical interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship by a credentialed professional who has completed an approved music therapy program. Sounds a little bit dense, right? Let's break it down a little bit. So, we use interventions that have been clinically and evidence based proven through studies and peer review to have impact on different populations of individuals. There are some that will work across many populations. You know, music recreation, just in general, for live music, works across different populations. Um, we're working on individualized goals. So that just means every patient that we see or every client, depending on what setting you're in, has their own individualized goals. Say this patient has difficulty formulating a word, even just one word. We will break down music into syllables mixed with consonants and use the live music as a background way to establish this consonant with um, the way that the mouth produces vocals, essentially. Um, Now that what it's essentially saying is that goal won't be the same for that patient as it is for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. Going on to the next part, this has to be done for music therapy within a therapeutic relationship, and what we mean by that is a relationship built on rapport. And then it has to be done by a credentialed professional like myself who has gotten through the program, gotten through a 6-month internship, and has taken the board exams to become certified music therapist. What was the part two to that question? I kind of lost myself a little bit.
Where did it originate from? Do you know any of the history of music therapy? Because I know it's relatively a new field as far as like jobs go.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's definitely a booming and blooming field as far as modernized allied health professions goes. Music therapy in the United States, actually, I could speak mostly about that. Music therapy in the United States originated right around the time of World War One and maybe around World War Two as well, mostly on the East Coast. It was originated by female nurses that were noticing music as an effective treatment in the combat veterans coming back from what they diagnosed back then as shell shock, what we know today as post traumatic stress disorder. So, use of live music was a way to achieve many different goals with these soldiers, namely to induce a calming sensation, to create a sense of familiarity, and to be a distraction from pain, even mental anguish. So that's it. Kind of evolved out of the infirmary, so to speak, and from there, um, it was primarily used with veterans for PTSD, and then kept going more so into memory care, which is I'd say where a lot of the care takes place. Memory care, as far as patients with this dementia, Alzheimer's. It takes place with patients with speech capabilities, or maybe stroke patients that have aphasia or the inability to swallow or speak or communicate. Um, and it goes into a bunch of different facets, but I know that that's where the origins of music therapy in America stem from.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's very interesting. Um, Especially that that's used as a treatment, like shell shock, post traumatic stress disorder is something that's been overlooked for a long time. That's interesting they were
Absolutely.
taking it on so early. Well, a question I got from a lot of students, and particularly this is Nubia's question, but a lot of kids ask this: what does a music therapist do? Like, what is a day in the life of a music therapist, and maybe specifically pre-COVID? I know now it's probably a little bit different.
So I this is a question we get a lot, obviously, because
Mm,
people want to know. It's and like you're saying, it's a booming and blooming field. When you're actually in a music therapy program, they do a lot to prep their students, and even when you're in an internship, to note your quote unquote elevator speech. So you can say, huh, what's music therapists do? Because it does happen all the time. And so
mm,
you want to know what to say. So, I'll give you a little definition of it, and then I'll tell you a little bit about my day. So, music therapists, we assess emotional well being, physical health, social functioning, communication abilities, cognitive skills, all of these through musical responses, designing music sessions for individuals and groups based on their needs, using everything from music improvisation, receptive music listening, songwriting, adapted songwriting, lyric discussion, lyrical analysis, music and guided imagery. I don't know if you all are familiar with guided imagery, but it is a cognitive behavioral form of therapy. And we use that with live music hand in hand, and it kind of can enhance it.
could you give
Uh,
us an example of that? I feel like some of the kids might be a little lost on what that looks like. What would be an example of that?
yeah, so guided imagery can stem from scripts. So let's say, I can give you like a general form of it. Let's say like you're in a session and we want to induce calm. So it can be anywhere from making sure your hands are seated, I'm sorry, planted on your legs, your feet planted firmly on the floor, making sure you're not in a fidgety motion, closing your eyes, engaging in calm, and the therapist will begin to describe an atmosphere, maybe a setting in your mind, maybe the feeling of the atmosphere that you're in. And as each element of the guided imagery is added, an element of the music can be added in as well.
Hmm.
So I want to create a set way of what I'm creating musically. So I mean, obviously, I want to stay in a foundation of, let's say, 1, 4, and 5. Your major 1, your major 4, and your major 5. I don't want to have any clashing harmonics from a dominant 5 or anything like that that will distract,
You
right?
don't want any minor seconds in there. We've been talking a lot about intervals.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And the theory does really come into it because you really want to not take the person out of the moment. You don't want to take yourself out of the moment by focusing on the music. The music is there to enhance the situation.
Okay, it's interesting. It sounds a little bit like a close to like a meditative state. Is
Exactly.
kind of what I'm getting from that.
You're doing like a guided meditative state, and in the imagery, you're observing the patient or the client's responses to not only the musical stimuli but to the words you're proposing in a guided imagery.
Eliseo from Sixth Period says, "What's your favorite age to work with?"
That's a great question. I have worked with quite a bit of different populations. When I was in school, I was doing school aged. I was with school aged children, working on a Native American reservation in Seattle, Washington, with at risk youth, as they were called, because it was a low income neighborhood, adverse crime effects of the neighborhood, and um, even from there, I worked with at-risk youth on another level, more like at-risk adolescents. Really, there was high school to early college-aged homeless children and teens in downtown Seattle. I've worked with veterans with PTSD who were 40s to 60s, maybe even 70s. And when I was in El Paso working for a private practice, I was working on adults with developmental disabilities, mostly with cerebral palsy, everywhere from age 20 and above. And I would say that my particular favorite group and way to use music therapy is what I'm doing now, where I'm working for a hospice company. And hospice can technically be any age, but it's typically geriatrics. So it's typically, age 55 and above. And that's about 80% of my client load, but I have had patients on hospice that are as early as 19 years old,
Mm.
and even younger. Um, what I do in the hospice setting is I'm not sure if your students are familiar with what hospice is, but I'll just give a brief overview. Hospice is essentially a service that provides in home care for an adult or anyone that's been diagnosed from their primary care physician with a terminal diagnosis with 6 months or less to live. So we provide nurse visits, we provide social work visits for emotional and coping and behavioral needs. And then this hospice actually provides music therapy visits as part of it as well. So I see the patients and I work on everything from creating what's called a legacy project, which would be perhaps creating like a commemorative CD of the patient's favorite music, or a CD uh, that details what the patient wants to say without being so direct to their family, because the hospice environment has such a dense emotional aspect to it. There are more so interventions focused on emotional processing, coping, the grief. Um, I can do everything from, like I said, working with legacy projects to working in the inpatient hospital units
Mm.
and being there during extubation when someone is passing or dying, and actively creating environmental music therapy as a way for the family to feel some sort of space in between hearing hospital noise and machinery that's in there and everything. It can create a really stable, unstable, stressful environment. So the reason I like hospice is because it's so varied and so wide
Mm.
and so yeah. I would say that that's my favorite population to be around.
Can you tell us a little bit about, and this is from Richard, how does music actually help le brain? He put le brain. What's the science behind it? So what do you know what the effects of music are in the brain? Is that something you guys study, and what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess a little bit about it is when when you're going for a music therapy degree in a bachelor's program, not only do you have to go for all of the necessary music education and performance routes as far as the classes necessary for it. You also have to go for part psychology, and then you have to go for part basic human anatomy, psychology and music, music and pharmacology, functional anatomy, and you learn about all parts of the brain, and you learn about the psychology of the music of the brain's reaction to music. And there's always this old wives' tale that, oh, this person's more musically inclined, so they are what, left brain leaning or
Yeah.
right brain leaning. That's a myth. A lot of modern science has dictated that music, in interaction with anyone's brain, not even just a creative person, activates all parts of the brain,
Hmm.
both hemispheres working together simultaneously. And that's why it's such an effective tool in working with aphasia, stroke victims, people suffering with memory loss. There are people that have come out of comas suffering from memory loss, and even one example I can remember is a congresswoman. I can't remember her name, or she was a representative. I can't remember. She got shot in an attempt of assassination, and
Hmm.
she was technically brain dead. But through physical therapy and music therapy and speech therapy, she was actually able to regain full speaking capabilities.
Hmm.
Um, so it's really interesting how the music interacts with all parts of the brain. I will say, as another part to answer your student's question, is that as far as what I use music for, and I can say it as a testament to what it does to the brain, there is this thing called the gate theory. And the gate theory centers on the brain's perception of pain. Now, I want you to imagine thinking about something and walking throughout your house, saying you're deep in thought if you pace like I do. And I want you to imagine stubbing your big toe. And if anyone stubbed their toe before, it's terrible. It's the worst thing ever. But you're not able to focus on anything else in that moment. I want you to be able to think about that pain and think about feeling it chronic over time and not just being an instance of stubbing your big toe. You're unable to focus on anything else. And in some settings that I'm working with patients, they're constantly feeling a pain that's that bad. And the interaction with music through the gate theory um, states that the mind can only focus on so much at once. So if something like music as a musical stimuli is interacting with that brain, the focus can be taken away from the pain. And therefore, the subjective report of the pain may be lower, not in all cases, but may be lower than when being faced with another type of response that's not musical.
Okay. Hmm. Well, I know you're a guitar player. I know you also use piano, but someone's question from Alex. He says, "Can any instrument be used for music therapy? And how would you?" And this is kind of my question: how do you utilize different instruments in music therapy?
Absolutely, that's a stellar question. Um, it's funny because you would think that a lot of guitarists end up becoming music therapists, but it's actually a lot of vocalists that end up becoming music therapists,
Hmm.
or orchestral instruments or band instruments. I know a lot of music therapists that are horn players, trumpet, trombone. I know many that are harpists, violinists. And don't tell them I told you this, but the violinists have the best pitch recognition. But
Well, you don't got to tell me that. No, I was joking.
uh, I will say there are some instruments that will probably. I mean, I think your primary instrument doesn't necessarily define who you are as a musician, but there are instruments that taking a primary instrument into a music therapy profession will better suit you for being able to play the other necessary instruments in the music therapy profession. Because you can use your own primary instrument as long, in a therapeutic session. But what is dictated as necessary to uh, graduate from a music therapy accredited program and then become a board certified music therapist is you have to be proficient in guitar use, piano use, and
Hmm.
vocal use. At least those three. Because, and I'm sure as you're thinking, probably your student was thinking when giving this question, I mean, how do you lug this stuff around all day? Say I'm a harpist. How am I going to take my harp to see 5 different people around the city or in a hospital environment or things like that? So although you can, with the patient's permission and the family's permission, bring your primary instrument if they want that. Say you were doing a harp or a trombone or something like that. It is probably going to be more um, easily easily easier to facilitate using a guitar or piano or something like that.
Okay, so it's like a practicality of like, can I take this with me? Is it too big?
Or is it too loud?
Is it
You
too
know, I mean,
loud? So
let's
like
say you're a timpani player. I don't think you're going to be able to
yeah,
bring those.
yeah, and then there's probably a little more versatility in like chordal bass instruments like the piano or electric
Right.
keyboard sounds like a great option.
Well, especially in a music recreation setting where, you're trying to create the best live setting of recreation of a person's favorite song, let's say, you're going to be your own band. So you need to be able to, like you say, use a chordal instrument to, so to speak, fill out the musical spectrum enough so that it is an entire experience rather than a solo instrument doing such.
Oh, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I also got a lot of questions that were just kind of like questions for a music therapist,
Okay.
not necessarily questions about a music therapy. So I'm going to try and rapid fire some of these questions at you. Let's see how we do. Eliseo, this is another question from Eliseo. He asked some great questions. In what ways can music be harmful?
I would pose the situation of, maybe this doesn't happen to everyone, but think about this. Some people have adverse reactions to music, whether it's even just passively stumbling upon it. Maybe you walk into a department store before COVID and, they're playing holiday music and you have a terrible association with holiday music, or someone has a terrible association with holiday music, be it not just that they don't like the music, but that there is a triggering sensation for them about something that happened way back when associated with this song. It can trigger memories, it can trigger traumas. So as music therapists, we don't want to assume someone's favorite music and favorite song because that can be harmful, whether it's not physically bleeding someone. I mean, I know there are songs that would put me in a bad mood pretty much instantly, and I would classify that as harmful.
Hmm, okay, especially when you're there to be treated for something.
Absolutely.
Okay, Kayla asks, could music therapy help animals?
Um, I have to be honest, I'm not too knowledgeable in that situation. But what I would say is, through my personal experiences with my animals being around me, I didn't necessarily use music therapy interventions, but I do notice that my dog thoroughly sleeps with less disturbances when I'm playing live music, acoustic guitar, versus when I'm just sitting there and I happen to move and maybe she's like, what are we doing? Where are we going? There's definitely less instances of her in more of a, and it seems to be that she's in a more comfortable state. So I will say that
Okay,
perhaps it does have some.
perhaps, yeah. That could also be like a learned behavior. Like they know that you're relaxed because you're playing music, so the animals relax. There could be multiple
Absolutely.
things there, right? Yeah.
And you're pinning in on a very important part, which is correlation does not mean causation.
It does not. A very important lesson for all of us to learn. Draken asks, what is good meditation music that is in minor? This guy's looking for a song recommendation. What's
Great.
your go-to minor song?
Well, this is again back to subjectivity. I'd say some people, as far as what minor would paint for us, minor typically gets
Oops.
associated with a sad sound or a
Mhm.
sad song. Some people feel a dopamine release and an uplifting from depressing music or sad music. I know for a fact, David and myself, Mr. Pena and myself, enjoy people like Elliott Smith
Mm.
or the Postal Service. People, something that someone would who's not familiar with it would probably say, "This is kind of sad. Why are you listening to it?" But it's good for us. Um,
You're dating us really hard. You're dating
yeah.
us so hard right now. That's funny because I had another question that was, why do we listen to sad music when we're sad if it just makes us feel worse? Well, some people it does make them feel worse, and some people it might not.
Exactly. Music is a subjective experience. I mean, it is art. There are some art forms that people don't love, and there's some art forms that people love, and it makes everyone feel different.
Okay. Let me see. I have a few more questions for you.
I would say, though, if you haven't heard The Sound of Silence, the original Sound of Silence,
Oh
that's
yeah.
a jam.
Someone put, what is the easiest way to learn the bass clef? So
I think I have 3 steps for that. practice, practice, and then practice.
Is it possible to erase a memory or stop a habit addiction with music? So in this question, it seems like there might be a little bit of like an assumption that there's some kind of like hypnotherapy kind of thing involved.
Right.
So is this a misconception, or what would you think?
Well, it's. I wouldn't say that definitively yes or no. I would say that one of the music therapy settings in which a music therapist can practice is in rehab centers and addiction help centers. And a lot of these programs instill the knowledge that part of getting away from an addiction is focusing your efforts on something else that is productive and creative. And a lot of people find creating music as a recreative situation that can be harbored for good and perhaps even a way to deter these addictive uh, tendencies of someone. So while it can't be a proven cure 100%, let's put it through the FDA, it certainly is a non-pharmacological intervention uh, that can be effective.
I think I have one last one. This is a big question, I think, and it covers a lot of the questions that I've had asked. But what are some misconceptions about music therapy? That's from Vanessa in eighth period.
Ooh, good question, Vanessa. I would say um, a lot of this can be referred back to on the what is harmful in music question. I'll go over some myths and realities from them. So, in this myth, let's say the myth is the client or patient must have some particular music ability to benefit from music therapy. The reality, musical training is not a prerequisite to benefit from music therapy at all. The focus is on non musical goals, and the music therapist is trained to structure and facilitate these interventions to each patient or individual or group. So, a little bit about that. In that instance, you don't have to be a trained musician to benefit from music therapy. It's actually our job as a music therapist to make it so that it is the least intrusive manner that you can, uh, participate in the music therapy session. So, say, oh man, I don't know. I hear this all the time. I have no experience with music. I am a terrible musician. It's not going to work out for me. And in that instance, to be like, okay, well, you know what? It's my responsibility as a music therapist to adapt instruments so that you can. And there are ways you create these music therapy environments. So what I would do, for example, is let's say I have a glockenspiel or a small xylophone that has removable plates. Okay, I would
And
probably
and that's what a glockenspiel is. It's like a small xylophone.
exactly, and I would remove the plates so that let's say we're in a pentatonic scale, major pentatonic scale, something that is pleasant to the ears, and there's no quote unquote wrong notes in.
Mm.
Um, then I would choose the key of that. I could have several instruments on this. So let's say I have a C major pentatonic scale on the xylophone that I have, while around the room I have a guitar tuned to a C major open chord. Um, I also have parts of my keyboard with color indicated keys, which are part of the scale to play. So I want to make the environment as easy and accessible as possible for this
Mm.
person to create. And I just say, have at it. Let's try playing. And what I do as the music therapist is guide them through this. Let's try something soft. Let's try something loud. Let's try something fast. Let's try something slow. Also, I might do what's called like a mirroring intervention. So I'll say, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to put your hands on these keys or all the black keys. Let's just say all the black keys. That's easy, right? It's all a pentatonic scale. And I'm going to say, I want you to play what your day was like before you got here for me. Let's say it's fast and scurrilous, it's all over the place. And maybe I'll take that into consideration. And maybe I'm on a djembe or some kind of percussive instrument. And I'll say, here's what I heard from you. And I'll play a loud percussive response to that. And maybe I'll say, this is what my day was like. And I play softer, slower. Maybe they can mirror that instrument on that. So it's a musical recreation it's a dialogue,
And
musical
it's not
dialogue.
it's not necessarily because I feel like maybe some people are going to get confused about pentatonic scales and that kind of technical thing, but basically you're creating an environment where they don't need to worry about musical knowledge, like
Right.
textbook musical knowledge or theory.
Mhm.
You, as the music therapist, understand that. You understand the theory, and you create an area where they can just freely explore music. You set
Right.
up the parameters, and then they can respond however they want to.
Right. Because inherently with music, some people feel like, oh man, I have to put in the hard work to be able to express myself. I want the reward of being able to express
Mhm.
myself. But, you know, that's our job
Yeah.
is to create that and make it easier to facilitate for you.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. Any other misconceptions about music therapy?
Let's see another one. Myth. One particular style or genre of music is more therapeutic than all the rest and works for everyone.
That's funny. I had a lot of questions about that. Like, how do you pick? Is it the same music? Do you pick different genres? Someone put, do people actually like country? Like is an insult to country music?
Resounding yes, yeah. It does happen a bit. I'm a fan of country. I'm not a fan of modern country, but I do like old country. But even if I'm not a fan of music, that comes back to the ethics part of being the music therapist. Whether I'm a fan or not doesn't come into play. I have to put myself aside, and I still have to learn the music, and I still have to become familiar with it. So I would say, yeah, I've had to learn every kind of music. When I was
Mm.
working with young children, I had to learn all the Disney songs, Baby Shark, and everything from there back. Not even that I liked it, I had to because it was effective in creating that dialogue, the musical dialogue. I've worked on everything from, you may not even think that country is therapeutic, but there's a lot of country. You could go into lyrical analysis. What are they talking about? What let's write new music. Let's write new lyrics to this country song. Let's talk as like genre to rap, even trap. You know what I mean? I have a lot of instruments and electronic instruments because the future's amazing now. That my iPad has so many open creative applications that I can use for just creating something like a trap beat or like a hip hop beat or something chopped and screwed. And maybe that's what we'll do for the session is, I'll create one part of the drum beat, you create another part of the beat, and then I'll have this microphone here and we'll have you rap about what you're experiencing over it.
Hmm.
So really any genre is open for it. What I would say is, if I can, for you all that are listening, I'd love to lay out the steps for you if you are interested in this as a career. Um, because you can work in so many different settings. Music therapists work, like I said, with myself in a hospice setting. They can work in school settings. I myself will actually be working in contract with EPISD at some point,
Mm.
possibly even Isleta at some point. Right.
The
We work in
district. Sorry.
yeah we work in school districts. We work in hospitals, in neonatal intensive care units, at end of life. We work with memory care. There's such a multitude of places that music therapists can work. So don't think that you'll be stuck in one place doing it. Also, I just want to talk to you a bit about the the requirements of becoming a music therapist, and then if I could, I would like to talk to you about what steps you can take now that would
Mhm.
that would help you on this career path. So, for a music therapist to become a board certified music therapist, you have to get a college degree. You have to get a bachelor's level and above. You can do a bachelor's level music therapy accredited program. There has to be defined music therapy, and there's list those on the amta.org. Of schools that provide this. Unfortunately, there's none in El Paso right now. I think they are working on it at some point. Um, you have to graduate from a bachelor's level of that. While you're there, you have to do 180 hours of music therapy practicum hours. So you have music practicum hours in college setting, which you also have to go through. So your weekly practicum performances,
Mhm.
and then you have to do 180 hours, which is essentially voluntary service, 1 hour at least a week in a setting of music therapy that has a board certified music therapist that is affiliated with your university. You get that done. You get graduated. You illustrate your proficiency in keyboard, piano and voice. They'll usually have like an exit exam for that. Once you're done with that, you have to find a 6 month accredited music therapy internship with a music therapy organization. They do have one in El Paso that I do work for and have worked for before. Now, once you're done with that, you're more than welcome. Come back home, and you can do your music therapy internship there. I mean, there's a wealth of sites around the U.S. that do that. So you need to do that for at least 6 months. Once you finish there, you're at the last step. You have to take the music therapy board certification exam.
There's always a big test. There's
Oh,
always a
yeah.
big test at the end, no matter what you do.
Much like being a music educator, they do have a board exam at the end of it. And this is something that you probably pay about $250 to $300 for. It's a 3-hour exam. I think it's about 200 to 300 questions. If you pass that, you're a board certified music therapist, and your license lasts for 5 years. You do have to keep doing continuing education, much like an educator, and really anything else that requires certification. So that is the professional way to go about it right now. And if anyone has questions about that, they can feel free to email me about that also. If I could talk a bit about what you can do right now, I would say if you're not familiar with piano or guitar, I would get familiar with piano or guitar. I would practice, if not just for the school benefit, practice for yourself. Because, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. It's both, right? It's not piano or guitar, but it's piano and guitar.
Right. You can be more proficient in one, but you need to illustrate the elemental fundamentals on both of those.
Oh,
so you
okay,
need
interesting.
to be able to formulate chords, play a 2-5-1, all of these, so that you can recreate music, even in a basic sense, on both of those, because you will be using them.
Okay.
And I would say, practice as much as you can reading basic sheet music. It is a skill that is just I'm unable to speak it the volumes of necessary it is to a career as a musician. Learn as many songs as you can. Even if you love a song on the radio, like sit down and try and figure it out. Try and write it out. If you speak a second language, you're already ahead of the curve. Try and speak 2 languages, English, Spanish, whatever you want to excel in, but it really puts you ahead of the curve as far as getting into college, as far as finding any other kind of profession past that. And in music therapy, it gives you a heck of a curve. As far as that, play music with not just your friends, but other people in their ensembles, and play as much music as you can if you want to have a career in music, because the more you learn, the quicker you get these abilities. And really, it's all about your exposure to it. You really need to have more exposure to gain this level of proficiency.
I think that's it for our interview. Thank you for your time, Mr. Garcia. I hope that we maybe have some future questions for you.
Absolutely. It was an absolute pleasure. And for anyone with questions, please feel free to email me at any point. I'll leave Mr. Pena my email. If this is the career for you, I hope that it works out for you. And then I also hope that this helps give you more of an idea of what a music therapist does.
That's great. It's a wrap.